Okay, you see, you guys have persevered to the end. Here we saw some guys did not persevere to the end, and they did not get the reward. You have persevered, and man, this time is for you. So let me say, if you want any resources at Buck Run, you can go on our website, buckrun.org, and you can find there Chris's email, Scott's email. Just email them. If you need something from me, Matt Morvay, my assistant, or Dustin here at School of Theology. There's a lot of stuff there. We're going to put up a link to our budget. Let me just say this about budget. If we call our budget our ministry plan, and if you present it that way, here's our plan for the next year, it keeps you from voting on all that other junk. And we put out that plan well in advance of our November meeting, and we give the number for our business manager, the pastor's numbers. If you have any questions, we say ask in advance. So when the meeting comes, the questions are already answered, and we just don't. We just don't have problems. Our budget meeting, like all business meetings at Buck Run, are 5 minutes long. It's just pretty unbelievable. Again, this is 16 years in with a lot of trust between pastor and congregation. It wasn't always like that, but it was never bad. It's easier now. We do not publish individual salaries. We publish the aggregate. But we tell our members, if you really want to know, you come in and we'll show you. So we're not hiding them, but we just think, and all our people get that because all of their salaries are published. You go on a website and get every Kentucky state government employee salary. So if I want to know somebody's tithing, I can find out. And they all hate that. They hate that. So, because they can see what each other make. Nobody likes that. So we don't have an issue over that. And there's one member who every year is going to come in and look and see what the salaries are. She comes in, she looks, she goes, thank you, and that's it. She doesn't complain about it. She just wants to know. Okay. So we try and be sensitive but transparent, and we really plan well in that budget and tell them exactly what our goals are. The other thing I would tell you, I've learned that if you do things really well, like they look slick, they look sharp, it just takes off some of the, it's like people don't have the same level of criticism and intensity when they ask questions if it looks good. So our budget looks really, really sharp. You say we're going to put up a link?
Yeah, if you go to buckrun.org/ministry plan.
buckrun.org/ministry plan. You can see what we've done, how it explains each part of the budget, what our mission is. It's all there. We're going to vote on that at our next family meeting, right? And so here I told you how easy it is. Watch the next budget meeting go an hour, and there'll be 20 questions about it. But I'd be surprised if that happened. Are any questions from you? Yeah.
So the community group recommend that for a church of 50 people with 1 or 2 Sunday school classes. Would you recommend a change or just keep it?
Yeah, I think, if you have a church of 50, I'd probably try and have 2 community groups, and just sort of explain. You want to make it small enough where you can have meaningful interaction and conversation, large enough where when there's a need, there are enough people there to meet the need, and I think I would try it. What you find is people love it once they're doing it. Like, they love it. I can't tell you how many people at Buck Run have told me in a time of crisis, their community group was just amazing. And they really do pick up slack. And so I think, you know, I've never tried it in a small church like that, but I think the principle's the same. I think it would work. It ups their level of commitment and involvement when they're in a community group. Yeah.
What would be, I guess, the flow of a community meeting? Major points,
Correct me if I'm wrong. He's asking what's the flow of a community meeting?
typically.
Why don't you come up, Chris? Yeah, just like, what's the agenda? Come up and grab a mic.
Flow community groups, correct? So we leave some flexibility, understanding that every group is different with kids. Honestly, I was telling somebody in the break.
We let each group decide whether or not they want to have kids. So you have some groups with no children, others with a ton of them.
And ideally, our groups are not age-based. Over
Right.
time, they become that, and we try to fight that. We want them to be cross-generational. And so that helps with childcare, because if you get all kids and all families of the same age and they have a bunch of kids. So there is some flexibility on what they do. Some meet for an hour and a half, some meet for 2, depending on if you've got, right now our community group meets at my house in a couple hours. We have like 14 kids in our community group right now. That's really hard. We do 40-minute discussion time because people would quit our group if they had to, because we rotate, we send out 2 people to go do childcare while the rest do discussion. So most of them will start off sharing some sort of food. So for some of them, that's a full meal. Mine meets on a Monday night. Most people are coming straight from work. They've not eaten dinner. So we feel we need to do a full meal. Everybody brings something else. We communicate during the week of who's going to bring what. Some groups, that's coffee and dessert, right? They may meet at a time which they don't need a full meal. They normally share some sort of food and just spend time together. So for us, that's 6 to 7. We're eating together. People are rolling in. For us, it's Monday night. Some people get there right at 6. Some people aren't coming until 6:20, depending on when they get off work. And we're spending time together. That's when we're catching up, seeing how their week's going. Ideally, that's when we're saying, hey, we prayed for this thing last week. How's that going? Checking in with people, building those relationships. We transition to discussion time somewhere between 7 and 7:15, and then have something like 40 to 45 minutes, sometimes longer, sometimes less, depending on what's happening with childcare that night. And where we're going over prayer requests, we're praying for one another, and then having specific application and discussion in that way. That's the general flow, some sort of fellowship meal together, and then application-based discussion, and then prayer. Some of them move that around a little bit, and we've tried to give them flexibility to say what fits your group within these boundaries, within these confines. We're okay with that. So we've found some of our groups move to right after church. They go to lunch together. They do a meal right after because it works. They live out of town. They don't want to leave town and come back. So that works. So their structure may look a little bit different, but generally that's the flow. But we try to leave some flexibility within the confines. Here's the goal. Here's where we're moving to, and we leave some people some freedom to do what they need to within that group.
How were they initially formed?
So originally we recruited. I believe we had 18 when we started. Recruited and personally picked facilitators, went to people and said, couples, and said, would you be willing to host and facilitate a discussion time, and explained what C groups were, which that process started probably over a year. I came to Buck Run right as we were launching, the summer that we were launching community groups, but that process of finding those community group leaders started a long time before then. They went through a really extensive training on the front end of like, here's what this is going to look like, and then they were launched out. Now, almost all of our groups come out of groups. So my group needs to multiply soon. And so I am trying to raise up people in my group to say, you're going to leave my community group, you're going to start your own, and I'm going to send you 80% of our people. And you're going to have your own group, and I'm going to start over, and I'm going to build this back up again. So training is easier now because almost every new community group leader is coming out of a multiplying group. They're coming out of a healthy group. So I'm coming alongside doing shorter training and more shoring things up, helping them to remember the vision and what we're doing and the fact that you're multiplying, but we need you to multiply again, right? That the more people need a spot to be able to go. So we rarely have somebody that's coming to be a new facilitator now who's not coming out of a group. Every now and then that happens, but most of the time it's people coming out of a current stable group.
And we have a layperson who was a phenomenal group leader, and so we sort of put him over it.
Yeah.
And he trains other leaders, and he works for Fish and Wildlife, just an incredible guy, one of our deacons, and just a tremendous job. So
he leads. We have coaches, so we have some people who've come out of successful groups who have done this for a while. They have each of them have 3 to 4 groups that they check in with regularly, so that before they come to me, before they even come to Paul, who's the guy that helps us with groups, they go to their facilitator, or they go to their coach. They go to them and ask those questions first, and so trying to raise up more leaders there. But yeah, Paul was doing community groups at Buck Run for 8 years before we officially launched them. He was
That's the
doing them
truth.
for a long time.
Yeah.
Before they were ever a Buck Run thing, he was doing them before they were cool.
yeah, keep the mic over there. Well, go ahead.
Just among the resources you often make available with the training material for the leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll my email's on the website. You email me. I'm happy to share anything I've got.
And who sends out questions?
What was that?
Are we still sending out questions?
They're actually in the app. We've made them available to everybody.
Okay.
So on
Buck
Sunday
Run app.
afternoon, literally right after the service, those go live, so anybody can see them. But if anybody wants anything, I'm happy to share any document I have. I'm happy to share it with you. Any of the classes that we have, any of the stuff, you email me and I'll share.
If you guys download the Buck Run app, I mean, it's just got just about everything on there. All of our media stuff from like Sunday school and everything. Is
Sunday
everything on
schools,
there?
everything's on there.
Everything's on there.
Wednesday night, Sunday morning, everything.
My Sunday outline is on there every week. I mean, it's really a handy tool. You don't have to be a member to download it. Just costs $30.
We started doing even the last year for kids ministry and student ministry, putting stuff up so that as families go home, they can pull up something really easily, see a short 1-page explainer of what their kids learned that day, so that over lunch they could better have that conversation with their kids, because they know, okay, here's actually the verse you looked at, here's what you studied. So as they're asking their kids, hey, what'd you learn in class today? You're not relying on, for me, it's my 4-year-old. She's not going to remember fully. But if I know what she learned, I can help to prod that conversation a little better. And that's all on the app.
You guys adopt a catechism?
No. It's one of those things maybe we should, but we don't have a formal one. Do
No,
we?
we don't have a formal one.
Yeah.
We sell the New City catechisms in our resource center, but
They teach it on Wednesday nights.
do they?
Which one?
New City.
What do you do on Wednesday nights?
I'm teaching through Genesis this year on Wednesday nights, so that's sort of the big class. We sometimes offer other classes in addition to that. We have children's program on Wednesday night.
Is that the same thing as the adult discipleship thing, or is that?
No,
No.
it's just sort of traditional prayer meeting without the prayer. I just teach. We have it's like everything else. I mean, it's hard to get people to come out on weeknights anymore. We have, how many normally come? 70 in my class, or something like that. About that, and children. So, but hey, as long as people are willing to show up and listen to me teach the Bible, I'm going to teach the Bible.
So yours is not considered a community group on Wednesday night?
No, that's just a big class. Whatever I want to teach. I can announce, if I'm teaching the Bible on Wednesday night, there are going to be some people are going to show up and listen to me teach the Bible.
We have put other stuff, like we've done financial peace as a separate class. In addition to that, we have a woman in our church who works with special ed students. So she taught like a 10-week course on how to work with special needs kids that drew people from the community. We do things like that are nice and are equipping to our people, but not something we would necessarily always run on a Sunday morning. But kids ministry and student ministry are also, that's big nights for them. So we're careful to try not to pull too many of the people that are serving in those. A lot of the adults that are there on Wednesday nights are serving either in student ministry or in kids ministry.
Yeah.
So how does a pastor balance ministry while maintaining his first ministry, his family, and doing those both well?
Okay. What I did and still do, but it's a different ballgame when you're an empty nester. But I think I did it. I think if you ask my sons, we just meshed the two. They were just with me on stuff. I was never fearful that my kids were going to resent going to church when they grew up because I made them go all the time. We did it. They were just in it with me, go on visits with me. We went every time. There was never discussion at our house, do I have to go to church today? You ask that question, I'll punch you in the throat. It's just like, that was a settled thing. My son said they love the church. But let me flip it. I'll tell you a story. Just the World Series happening right now. So my son Michael, who's now a pastor in Missouri, was a huge Braves fan. And the Braves won the series in '95. And I'd heard Adrian Rogers tell this story about a dad taking his son to a World Series, and I just thought that'd be a neat thing. So I said to Michael, hey, the next time the Braves make it to the World Series, I don't care how old we are, let's go. Let's make a promise right now, we'll go. He said, okay. I said, if I'm 80 years old, you're going to have to take me. He said, yeah, let's do it. So that was '95, so Michael was 12. The next year, I watched in horror as the Braves sail through the playoffs to land in the World Series, because I've got a revival scheduled with Sam Cathy. I don't know if any of you guys know who Sam Cathy was, but Sam Cathy was just like, I loved Sam. He could be real legalistic, and he was big time about missing church. And I'm like panicked. And I'd made a promise. I'll never forget, Sam Cathy pulls up at the church on Saturday night. We're going to start the next morning. And he was a mentor of mine, and I was dreading telling him this. I knew what his reaction was going to be. He did not disappoint. I said, Sam, you need to know something. I said, I'm going to be here tomorrow. And I'm going to be here Monday night, but I'm not going to be here Tuesday night and Wednesday night. He said, well, where are you going to be? I said, I'm going to be at the World Series. If I had told him that I was setting up a statue of Dagon in the sanctuary, he couldn't have looked more shocked or disappointed. It was just like, you're what? I said, look, and I told him the story. He said, well, what's your church going to think? I said, Sam, you don't understand. It doesn't matter what my church thinks. That's not part of my decision here. I made a promise. I'm the first to tell you, it was a stupid, stupid promise. But I'm not going to say no to my son when I made him a promise. And man, Sam just blasted me. And it pretty much ended our relationship. He never got over it. His son-in-law told me that he would even use me as a sermon illustration. He had this sermon about forsaking your assembling yourselves together. And he said, I know this one preacher. If I said his name, all of you would know it. And he missed revival to go to a ball game. And that's the way he told it. Well, no, I missed revival to keep a stupid promise. But it's funny, the Braves won the first two games in New York, which, we couldn't go to New York, but the next two games are going to be in Atlanta. And I didn't have tickets or anything. I won't take time to tell the whole story, but I will tell you this. And I told Michael, I said, look, I'm not going to pay scalping prices for this. We're going to go to Atlanta, and we'll try and get tickets. If I can get tickets at face value, we'll go. But, if I can't, we're going to watch it from a hotel room in Atlanta. And, of course, Tanya and Seth had to go, too. They weren't going to let me and Michael go to the World Series without them. So the four of us go down there. Long story short, I end up getting free tickets to the World Series, staying in the home of the chief information officer of Turner Broadcasting, and watching the game from Ted Turner's box. So I'm just saying, God's blessing was on that. I don't think anybody at Ashland Avenue remembers that. I got an anonymous letter about it, but I can tell you two guys who remember it. Both my sons are in ministry, and both of them talk about it. Their dad was a man of his word. And, you do something like that a few times. I mean, they don't resent the fact that you're serving the Lord when they know that you love them and that you want them to love Jesus the way you do. That's what it's about. It's not about being a slave to the church. It's not about trying to impress people. It's about the love of the Lord. And I think that's the key, man. You've got to have joy. I just think that's missing in so many preachers' lives. But it's the key to a good marriage and a home. And you got to come home and act like an idiot. You got to dance and play and laugh. And sometimes you're not going to feel like that. But this is what God designed you to be. You're going to set the tone in your home. And if they're up and you come in and you're down, they'll come down to meet your mood down here. And if they're down and you're up and you come in, they're going to meet your mood up here. You are the guy who sets the tone in the home. And I think you've just got to always be aware of that. And I just think one of the greatest indicators of being filled with the Spirit is that you're fun to live with. And I just think if you're not fun to live with, there's no way you can say you're filled with the Holy Spirit. And I just try and remind myself of that all the time. I remember I told you earlier, church don't want to hear you whine. Guess who else doesn't? Your wife and your kids. And God designed you to be a man. He designed you to shoulder this burden. And so have joy in your service to the Lord and in your home. And I would tell you, I think that's the key. It's always a struggle to balance things, just because your activities will always expand to fill your time. So you're not going to run out of stuff to do. So then it's always a matter of priorities and choosing the right ones. And I just think if you got joy as you do them, it's just going to make things go a whole lot better at both places. Yes, sir.
So you talked about your predecessors. Have you given much thought, maybe you're not that close to retirement, but what the transition would look like at Buck Run? And has that been built into the DNA now, or is that something that will be kind of in the future as that gets closer?
Yeah, it's a part of my thinking. I'm just going to leave it at that. It is, just to be real candid, when I left Ashland Avenue to come here in 1997, I left a church that was vibrant and thriving, and we had bought the property for them to relocate. It run between 1,200 and 1,300. And I watched that church blow apart under my successor. And I don't want to live through that again. So I'm trying to do everything I can to set up my successor at Buck Run for success. And yeah, I got a plan. It's not imminent. It ain't going to happen in the next year or two, but it's going to happen. And obviously, we're congregational government. It's going to have to be the church that decides what to do. But I do intend to suggest certain things, and that'll be their decision whether or not they do them. But I think I have an extraordinary amount of the church's trust and confidence, and I'm not gonna try and force them to do something they don't want to do. But I think they'll listen. I will tell you this: whatever happens, when I leave Buck Run, I'm leaving Buck Run. and I'll miss it. But it's the right thing. And to do otherwise would be about me. Buck Run will go on fine without me. And I'll be fine without Buck Run. I know that. It's about the Lord. But, man, I've invested a large part of my life, and they're wonderful. So I'll be happy. I want you to know, I'm not going to mope and be sad. It's just like I've never mourned my dad. My dad died 10 years ago. I've never mourned him. I miss him. And when I have tears, they're sweet tears. I'll be that way about Buck Run. But I'll be fine. I'm hoping some church in Hawaii will call me. That's my plan. So, but I've got a plan, But whatever happens, when I leave, I'm leaving. I'm not hanging around to be somebody else's problem. Yeah.
What would you say is the greatest threat to the next generation of pastors coming up over the next decade? And what advice do you think, going forward, pastors need to be faithful and to also remain engaged in our culture?
In my estimation, there's no greater existential threat right now than this whole thing about gay marriage, gender, basically the whole question of issues of sexuality. Because we're under, I say pressure, which I use that word advisedly. I've met with pastors in Cuba and in China, and what we have is nothing like the pressure those guys are under. But it's just so hard for Christians here to listen to the world tell them that they're bigots and hateful and all that. And I just fear the next generation giving that issue away. And once you give that one away, I just don't know how you defend the rest of the Bible. Ultimately, the world's not going to find the atonement palatable. So once you play that game of trying to appease the world, you're going to lose the gospel. The gospel is offensive. So I just think what I'm seeing, so-called evangelicals coming up with biblical defense of homosexuality, I'm like, are you serious? I can respect someone who says, I don't believe that part of the Bible, a lot more than I can respect someone who's trying to use the Bible to prove that the Bible really doesn't have a negative view of it. Like, Matthew Vine's book and all that. So that to me is going to be the biggest threat. And then leading a church in biblical fidelity when we are so far out of the mainstream of our culture, it's going to be increasingly difficult. And one reason why I went ahead and made the decision for Buck Run to move and build when it did, I became convinced that the day is coming in the not too distant future when a church like ours will not be able to secure a loan. So I said, man, let's do this now. And we got 100 acres. We're not going to run out of room. And it's ours. So I did that. We spent a total of $12 million all told. And you got to justify $12 million outlay. If it were only about just that building in our generation, I'd say that wasn't worth it. But I'm convinced it's about the next 100 years to be on that property that is ours, and we're trying to get it paid off as quickly as we can so we don't owe anybody for it. And I think that's going to be our greatest challenge. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How do you effectively pastor a larger congregation? People don't get lost.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, all of us have challenges, and already told you my challenge is sort of being an introvert. The one thing that I try and do is I try and be available. If someone says they want a meeting with me, they're going, Matt is going to. I get Matt on it right then. I tell him Matt will set that up. It might have to be somewhere out there, but it's going to happen. And the fact that we try and respond to that immediately. After every service, I'm going to stand around. As long as people want to talk, I'm going to be there and see them. I do things like Bibles and biscuits once a month, a men's Bible study breakfast at Cracker Barrel. And, I'm there. You want to see me? You come out at 6 o'clock on Tuesday morning. I'll be there. And, I try and do these things that have some kind of personal touch to it. It's not the same level of intimacy of pastoring a church with 100 people. But I'm also convinced that if you organize it right, people can still have rich and meaningful relationships, and especially with mentors, but it won't necessarily be me. So at Buck Run, we try and identify if someone has a complaint, is the complaint that their need was not met, or is their complaint that I'm not the guy who met the need? And we just try and be honest. When I came to Buck Run, we laid out a completely different paradigm. If I'm your pastor, I'm going to be teaching at Southern. I'm not always going to be here. And I actually had a lady at the church who's still there, God bless her, who said to me, "You're telling me if a boy in our church gets hit on his bicycle on a Thursday afternoon, you're not going to show up at the hospital?" I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying." I said, "Now it's my job to make sure that somebody's there for them, but it probably won't be me." And we just we laid that out in December of 2000 or November of 2003. This is what it's going to look like. I got a 99% vote. Now, there have been lots of times, especially early on, when people came to me and complained that I didn't do something. And I just said, no, again, I always ask the question, what's your complaint? Is it that you didn't get your need met, or that I didn't meet your need? And they go, yeah, that you didn't do it. Okay, well, you voted for it, unless you're one of the 6 people who voted against it. And I'm pretty sure those 6 people left week 1, so they're not around. So, I was just really upfront with what it was going to look like. But I will also say that Tanya helps with it an awful lot. And, I just try and touch people a lot. I will tell you, there's one level in which pastoring now is easier than it's ever been. Because you've got so many different ways to contact people. Facebook, Instagram, all these things. People feel touched. Like if you like their photo of their grandchild or whatever. Hey, the pastor liked my photo. You get credit for that, man. It's like, whenever did you get to do something so easy that made people go, wow, the pastor noticed me? So there are ways to do it. It's not the same as mentoring somebody personally over a long period of time. In a larger church, you do have to be more selective about that. But my friend Dave Adams used to say, when you're going somewhere, take somebody with you. And, recently, I forget where I was going, driving somewhere quite a distance to preach. And I just said to interns and the staff, hey, I don't need anybody to go with me, but anybody wants to go with me, you're welcome to go. And Wesley went. Is Wesley still over there? Yeah. I'm sorry. So Wesley, Zach went. That guy. The guy over there whose name I forgot went with me. Yeah. Zach went with me. We had a great time and got to talk all the way there, all the way back. It was a lot of fun. So I just try and do that. But interns are one way you get to do that, and you're trying to build relationships with people who then you're trained to build relationships with people. But it's not always going to be the pastor. That's for sure. Yes, sir.
A lot of stuff you talked about, I completely agree with. But working in a church that's about 50, and I've only been there for a year and a half, how long do I wait before I start to do this kind of stuff?
Well, here's the thing. Being a pastor is a lot like playing poker, in the sense that, yes, you can. Anybody's had my pastoral ministry class has heard this speech. So here, it's not so much the game so much as it is you've got to know exactly how many chips you've got. So credibility chips are what we're talking. Every time you make a change in the church, it costs you chips, right? And there are certain things that cost you major chips. Change the worship style, the bag is empty. You are all in, right? And good pastors always have a sense of how many chips they still have in the bag. And they don't ever get in a deficit situation. They might come close to being at the bottom of the bag, but they know when to stop. When I was at Ashland Avenue, I had an incredibly high-powered staff. Dave Adams, one of the deans at Liberty, was on my staff. David Hatcher, pastors one of the 10 largest churches in Brazil now. I'm talking mega, 28 campuses, tens of thousands of people in his church. Was on my staff. My dad was on my staff. Tim Parsons, church planter in Lexington, is on my staff. And I had to fire 2 guys in one day. The bag was empty. Adams and Hatcher come in the next staff meeting, like, man, now's the time to pounce. Now's the time we got to do this and do that. I looked at them. I said, you're nuts. I said, dudes, I have no chips in the bag. We're not doing anything for the next 3 months. I'm gonna preach good sermons. I'm gonna visit the sick. I'm gonna love on people. I'm gonna make phone calls. I'm gonna do all the stuff you have to do to build chips back up. I'm not trying anything else for a while because I just spent every chip I had to fire those 2 guys. And I would tell you, my long answer to your question is, you're going to have to gauge how much credibility you have with them, how many chips you've got in the bag, and then how much whatever changes you need to make are going to cost you. And don't get in a deficit situation. You probably want to change a few small things first. Every now and then, a guy gets called to a church where they're just ready for change. They're aching for it. And so if you're in a situation like that, go for it. But most guys are going to a church where they're like, there are 2 immutable facts of Baptist churches. One is they all say they want to grow, and 2, they're all lying when they say it. What they mean is, if there are people out there who look like us, think like us, who want to come here, as long as they don't take my parking place or sit in my seat, they're welcome. But you and I know that's not how a church grows. And so to get them where they're ready to accept other people and grow, and, man, the oldest people at Buck Run are completely displaced. Our church today is nothing like the church they first joined 30 years ago. I mean, nothing. And so they don't bellyache about it, but I'm sensitive to them, and I'm grateful to them because they've given up more than anybody else in order for us to grow. So you're going to have to just sort of analyze things like that. What's this going to cost me? How many chips in the bag do I have? What can I do to get more chips? And again, a lot of the things of just preaching well, loving on people, having them in your home, being in their home, visiting them at their job, whatever, that gets you chips. And the more you get, then the more they'll trust you and you can change things. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah. I know when we were here, or when I was here before, we didn't talk a lot about ministry burnout. Seems to be a big issue today as you're observing pastors. A lot of interaction with that. How do you counsel that? Sabbaticals.
Yeah, this is a great question. He asked about ministry burnout. I'm probably the worst person in the world to ask that question because it's not a thing I've ever experienced. And I can't explain that. I see it as an incredible grace of God in my life. I like vacations, and Tanya and I take them and enjoy them. And we sort of do almost sabbatical weeks. So, about every 2 to 3 months, we're going somewhere. And we like it. Hawaii's sort of become we like the Big Island, and we go there a lot. We're at the stage of life where you got that discretionary money that you didn't have when you were young. And I usually have Sky Miles that I can get us there for next to nothing. So we do that, but maybe that's one reason why I don't feel burnout. But I would just tell, a lot of times if a guy feels burnout, I want to always dig deeper, because there could be a lot of things at work. Sometimes he's just exhausted. Moses, Elijah, we're certainly there. But sometimes there's something else going on. It can be sin. It can be another kind of a pressure, not necessarily his sin, but somebody else's, whatever. So, I just want to ask him, what are his habits? What's his walk with the Lord like? What's he doing to build joy into his life? What kind of time is he taking with his family? I mean, there are a lot of things, but I've just got to confess I'm probably not the best one to deal with that, because I've never experienced it. It's a grace of God that every Sunday morning, in my whole life, I don't ever remember getting up on Sunday morning going, oh, I wish I didn't have to do this, other than when I'm just ill.
Do you have a sabbatical policy for the staff? Every 5 years they get?
No, we work them to death. Yeah, and the church voted to give me a sabbatical of 8 weeks last year, and then Moeller asked me to be the dean, and that was gone, so I didn't take it. And, so Buck Run, it's not something that's in their DNA about thinking about sabbaticals. And even when the deacons presented to the church to give me those 8 weeks, because I wanted to write something, people were not begrudging it. They just didn't understand it. It was like, what? So we probably need to do a better job of that. But, yeah, I don't have a great answer for that. I don't know how to counsel a guy with that, because I've had other kinds of struggles, but never just like, well, I'm tired of this. I can't do this anymore. Yeah. By the way, this is Dr. Greg Heisler, used to be on faculty at Southeastern, and the author of a great book, Spirit-Filled Preaching. And I recommend you get it. You ought to get it and have him sign it while he's here. I'm proud. He's a Southern Seminary PhD in preaching, and I'm proud of our preaching PhD grads, literally all over the world. Other questions? Yeah, John?
Sort of revisiting the CHIPS comments that you made. CHIPS and getting consensus at the beginning of your ministry, or I'm thinking maybe even in terms of like when you became the dean of theology.
Yeah.
Certainly there are probably some things, now you've got a lot of chips built up here.
Yeah.
So maybe that might be a little bit of a stretch as far as the analogy I'm trying to get at. But I mean, were there things immediately you thought, well, that's the way they did it, but this is the way procedurally I'd like to do it here? Are there some changes maybe in the way things are done behind the curtain in the School of Theology that you've got some plans to change? And again, I'm really not asking for specific answers to those things, other than when do you play your chip with no consensus, and when do you decide, I think I better get some.
Well, let me leave it in the context of my church.
Okay.
All right? Because that's really, first of all, what we're talking about. It is a rare thing that I say, I don't care what you guys think, I'm doing this. I mean, it's rare. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, but it's not frequent. And it is frequent that they say to me, we need to do this, and I go like, I don't know, but then I do it, or they talk me into it, or we talk through it and change it and reach consensus. We're really, we're open to, and we're all intreatable. We speak to one another. So it's a rare thing. There was a guy I wanted to hire as my exec pastor one time. When long-term guy left, I needed an exec pastor. There was a guy that I think highly of, and I wanted to get him. And I have the authority at Buck Run to hire and fire, but I want other people's opinions, so I had the personnel team interview him. And they talked to him for 2 or 3 hours. And after he left, I said, well, what'd you guys think? And the chairman looked at me and said, Pastor, if that's who you really want, we're going to back you up. But we don't think that's who you want. We think that guy will drive you crazy. Because we know you, and we just listen to him. He'll drive you crazy. Really? Yeah. Okay. And I just took them at their word. And I knew they were looking out for me. And I didn't hire him. And it turned out to be exactly the right decision. So, when we made the decision to move, the church had voted in 2002, I think it was, to move. But it wasn't feasible. They were in debt still, and I came, and there was basically a $4 million debt that we had to pay down, and I wanted at least $1 million in the bank before we even really started that. So it was 2012 before I stood in the pulpit on a Sunday and laid out the timeline and said, we're going to be in there by Easter of 2017. Turned out we were in there by November of 2016, but that was a unilateral thing. But also I already had their consensus that was the long range plan, but it was on my shoulders to say when, and I did. So it's just there are certain things that I have to lead in, but that's rare that I just say I'm unilaterally making this decision. I don't care what anybody else thinks. That I'm so convinced it's the right thing and everybody else doesn't. That hardly ever happens. We talk it out. Other questions? All right, you look absolutely burnt out. It's been a long day, but I want to say thank you for coming here, listen to me with my froggy voice today. I just woke up this morning and this happened, so it wasn't the best day for it to happen, but that's up to the Lord. And I want to thank you. You've been encouraging and a blessing to me. I pray that it was a blessing to you. We're here to serve you. Thank you for being loyal alums to Southern Seminary, or a friend of one anyway. And it's just been a joy to spend the day with you. Thank you so much.